Things are so expensive these days, and we are all looking to save some money. And there's no better way to do that than in the kitchen. Budget meals can save us a ton of money and they can be delicious. So, I have put together an entire compilation of a bunch of my budget meals to help you save money in the kitchen today. We started this week off with one of my absolute favorite budget meals. This meal is so delicious and so tasty and will make you love rice and beans. This is Cuban rice and beans. I start off with one diced onion that I pop into a frying pan with about a tablespoon of olive oil. And then I go ahead and I chop up 4 cloves of garlic, and I just get them diced down as small as I possibly can, and I pop those right in with my onions. They don't need quite as long as onions, as they'll burn a little quicker, but I find if I put them in a couple minutes after I got my onions in, then they do just fine. I go ahead and I put in about 2 cups of chicken broth, and then 1 cup of rice. To this, I add 2 teaspoons of cumin and 3 teaspoons of oregano. These spices really help to flavor this dish so nicely. I go ahead and add a teaspoon of salt and 2 cans of black beans. This recipe comes together really easily and really quickly. So I'm just going to let the rice and the beans simmer in that broth until they are nicely cooked and that rice has soaked up all that flavorful broth. And while that is happening, I am going to chop up a handful of collard greens. And I dice these up into smaller chunks just so that they're mouthful pieces. And I just stir it into this warm dish and let it wilt down. You can top this with a little bit of cilantro, and I also served it with some frozen vegetables on the side. I guarantee this dish is a hit. It was so yummy. Moving on, this is a dish that both my children and my husband really enjoyed. My daughter asked for it again the next day. So it was a good thing that we had leftovers. I did this dish because I have a lot of pineapple zucchini that I am looking for creative ways to use up, and this was the perfect dish for that. This is Hawaiian chicken. So I am doing this as a sheet pan meal. I diced up 2 onions and put 1 onion on each pan. Now, traditionally, you would use peppers on this dish. However, I had this asparagus that was getting quite old and a little wrinkly and really needed to be used up. So I used asparagus instead of peppers on this dish, and it turned out just fine. It was quite tasty, so I don't think there's much of a problem subbing out peppers for asparagus if you need to or want to. Then I took 4 chicken breasts and put 2 diced chicken breasts on each sheet pan. You'll want to dice these chicken breasts up into 1 to 2 bite pieces. Once that's done, you're going to spread these out evenly over your sheet pans. Now, if you don't want a big mess to clean up off of your sheet pans, you can always line these with some aluminum foil and you'll have the same effect. When this is done, you're going to go make your sauce. This is a really easy and really delicious sauce. Start off with 1/2 cup of pineapple juice. To that, you add 1/3 cup of olive oil, 1/3 cup of brown sugar, 1/4 cup of soy sauce, 1/4 cup of ketchup, 1/4 cup of sweet chili sauce, and a teaspoon of ginger, a teaspoon of onion, and a teaspoon of garlic powder. When that's all added in, you're just going to whisk it all up to get it nicely combined. If you enjoy budget meal content or saving money in the home, make sure you go to check out my channel. I have so many ideas there for you to help you save tons of money. Once that sauce is fully combined, you're just going to spread it evenly over your sheet pan dishes. So after this, you can also stir it to get it nicely combined. I also put some of my pineapple zucchini on the sheet pans. You can do this, or if you're not huge pineapple fans, you can leave this part out. You are then going to roast these at 350 degrees for 25 minutes. This gave like a sweet sour chicken. It was so yummy. You can serve this with rice, with pasta, or as we chose to do, we served it with some boiled potatoes. Very budget friendly and very, very tasty. I know chicken breast is not always as cheap, so chicken thighs can also be subbed in here. I would just cook it for another 5 minutes if you choose to use the chicken thighs. But the nice fatty chicken thighs would also make a very delicious add-on to this and even more budget friendly. I love sheet pan meals because they are just so quick and easy to put together, and they are done and delicious. So this following night, I am doing another sheet pan meal. I am doing a taco beef sheet pan. So right now I diced up 1 onion and got it on my sheet pan. I used 2 russet potatoes and I diced them up to bite-sized pieces. And then I took a good couple of handfuls of Brussels sprouts and I got the ends taken off and chopped them in half. I used 2 tablespoons of olive oil, a couple teaspoons of salt. I sprinkle over 2 teaspoons of cumin. I love cumin. It is one of my favorite spices. When you are cooking budget meals, having them properly spiced is so important. I also use 2 teaspoons of garlic and 2 teaspoons of chili powder. Having properly spiced dishes can make the difference between having bland dishes or having dishes that you absolutely love. So make sure that you have a good stocked spice cabinet. So to this, I am adding some canned stewing beef that I have. Now you can use any protein here. It could be chicken again. I would suggest having some stewing beef, but sausage would also work really well here. I baked this at 425 in the oven for a half an hour. You're just going to want to make sure that your potatoes are nicely cooked so that you can stick a fork in them and they're soft, and that your protein is also fully cooked through. Next is another quick and easy meal. This is egg fried rice. I start off dicing up 1 yellow onion and getting that in my frying pan. I have about a teaspoon of olive oil in there. It is not necessary to use oil to cook with. If you cannot afford it, you can use water to keep it from sticking to your pan. So if oil is not on your budget list, then it's not necessary to cook with. Just use a little bit of water to keep things from sticking. Next, I take up my collard greens and I just chop those up and I get them cooking in my frying pan with my onion. I do enjoy adding greens to absolutely everything. Egg fried rice typically does not ask for collard greens. You could put peas in there or some mixed vegetables, but I had those collard greens, so that is what I was working with today. So go ahead and beat up 3 eggs. You can add in more eggs if you're wanting to add more protein to this meal. I thought 3 was going to be just fine though, so that's what I add in. And after my greens and onions have cooked down a bit, I go ahead and scramble those eggs into this dish. If you do not already have some pre-cooked rice, go ahead and cook up a couple cups of rice. I add in 2 cups of already cooked rice to this dish. I am using basmati rice in this dish, but you can use whatever rice that you enjoy or have in your cupboard. Once your rice is added, you're just going to go ahead and stir that to combine it all together. To that, add 1 tablespoon of soy sauce. And to that, add in a tablespoon of Chinese 5-spice. This dish was really, really good. It is all of your needs. You get your carbs, you get your proteins, and you get your veggies. It's really, really budget friendly, and our entire family really enjoyed this. I have found so often while trying to find fun, tasty, budget-friendly meals that thinking outside of the box is really important, and that means sometimes looking into different cultures. Indian cultures, Asian cultures, they all have really budget-friendly meals that are so delicious. So I like to pull from different cultures to find those budget-friendly meals that really tickle the taste buds. And don't feel penned in by a recipe. You can play with the recipes and use up the ingredients you have. You do not always have to stick to what the recipe says. You'll find that I've done that quite a bit in this video, where I will use up things that I have instead of using what a traditional recipe would call for. It's totally okay, and it saves you money in the long run using up the things you have in your refrigerator. Lastly, I am moving on to gingered chickpeas and tomatoes served over rice. I start by dicing up 1 yellow onion and getting it into my frying pan. And as that is frying up, I add in 1 teaspoon of turmeric and 1 teaspoon of cumin and just stir that in. I have a jar of chickpeas. You could use 2 cans of your chickpeas. I'm using an entire quart of my chickpeas that I have previously canned. And I just get those in the frying pan with my frying onions. You can add a cup of broth here if you like. I just added a cup of water. It depends on whether you want that extra flavor or not, or if you even have broth available. To this, I add 1 can of drained sweet corn. And then I do not have any fresh tomatoes, but if you have fresh tomatoes, you can certainly use them here. I did have a can of diced tomatoes that I added here. Now, if you have balsamic glaze or balsamic vinegar, you can add them to the tomatoes. If you don't, that is totally optional. You are then going to simmer this on medium heat for 10 minutes. This dish was really delicious. In the last 5 years, prices on absolutely everything has skyrocketed. This has made things really difficult for a lot of people. People who used to be getting by just fine are now struggling. People are struggling to pay their bills, and food banks are feeling overwhelmed. So a lot of people are looking for ways to save as much money as they possibly can. And making budget meals and saving on groceries is a great way to do that. In the last 5 years, I myself have also had to cut back on the budget. Where $50 would get me a decent amount of groceries 5 years ago, it barely gets me anything now. So over the last 5 years, I have been working to find delicious, budget-friendly meals for my family to enjoy. And I love to share all those recipes for you guys here, so hopefully you can benefit from them as well. The garden produce is coming in droves, so I find it really helpful to find recipes where I can use up a lot of the garden produce. And a vegetable lasagna with zucchini noodles is a perfect way to do this. This means for me that the majority of ingredients that I'm using are free. And if you are buying from a farmer's market or the grocery store, then hopefully they are cheap because they will be in season right now. I start off by chopping 1 onion, and I have a bunch of these little red pimento peppers that I'm using, so I cut up a few of those. You may want to do just 1 large bell pepper if that's what you're using. And for the meat sauce, I am using a pound of ground turkey. You can also use ground chicken, and I am using 2 cups of lentils. I've got red lentils here. Now, if you are not wanting to use the meat because meat is expensive these days, you can just use lentils and it is perfectly fine with that. I am using my last can of tomato sauce because I am hoping to can a lot of tomato sauce this year. So add 1 can of tomato sauce to your meat sauce there, and you're going to brown the meat and simmer everything there until the flavors combine. I also added a handful of chopped basil to this recipe. If you don't have fresh basil, you can go ahead and use about a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half of dried basil. I have these beautiful zucchinis that my friend sent home with me the other day, and I would like to use them up. Unfortunately, I am not getting a whack load of zucchini this year. I have gotten 2 zucchini from my own garden, so having this extra zucchini is absolutely lovely. Normally, I'm swimming in zucchini, so this is a perfect recipe for those times. So I'm just slicing the zucchini lengthwise to create zucchini noodles. In my pan, I'm just going to put some of my meat sauce on the bottom so that my zucchini noodles don't stick. And then I'll start placing my zucchini noodles on top, and I'm going to put this together the exact same way that I would put together a regular lasagna. This is such a great summer meal. It is so fresh and full of vegetables. It is so hearty as well that it's just perfect for a busy summer day. I'm actually going to freeze this meal afterwards so that I can save it for one of those crazy days where I need a quick meal. Now on top of the zucchini noodles, you can put a ricotta cheese, cottage cheese. I had a lot of cashews and I did not have ricotta cheese or cottage cheese, so I decided to make a dairy-free cottage cheese or ricotta cheese out of cashews. So what I did to make this was I took about 2 cups of cashews, soaked them in water for about an hour. I drained that water and then I blended the cashews. I did end up adding about a 1/4 cup of water back into it, and it makes this beautiful blended dairy-free cheese. On top of that ricotta, I add more meat sauce, and then I'm going to cover it with some shredded cheese. If you wanted to make this completely vegan, you would take out the meat and then add dairy-free cheese to this. I go ahead and add 1 more layer to my lasagna, so another layer of zucchini noodles, another layer of the cashew cheese, a last layer of my meat sauce, and then more cheese on top for that lovely cheese topping. I baked this in the oven at 350 degrees for 50 minutes, and it came out with a beautiful crusty cheese topping. The zucchini noodles were perfectly done, and it just looks so delicious, ready for a quick meal on a busy day. I just love that this meal is so full of vegetables and fiber, and it's so good for you and so incredibly budget friendly. We just dug up all of our potatoes, and they are these lovely fresh potatoes that are absolutely delicious. So I decided to use them in a slow cooker meal called cowboy casserole. This meal has 6 cups of shredded potatoes. It called for like baked hash brown potatoes, but I decided to do mine fresh and they turned out just fine this way. So don't feel like you need to go to the store and buy the hash brown baked potatoes, because just shredding them yourself is just fine, and it probably saves a decent amount of money doing that as well. This recipe also calls for a pound of ground beef, but I don't know if ground beef is incredibly expensive where you are, but it's very expensive where I am. It's about $7 to $7.50 or $7 to $7.50 per pound where I am. So I am using ground turkey again, and I am also splitting that with some lentils. When you put beans or lentils in with your meat, you make the meat go further and you add extra fiber and minerals to this, and it makes it a lot more budget friendly. I find saving money on meat is one of the best ways to save money at the grocery store, so I use a lot of beans in my cooking. So I'm going to go ahead and brown that turkey in my frying pan, as well as adding the lentils there. I did pre-soak the lentils with a little bit of apple cider vinegar because it makes them easier to digest. While that's browning in a separate bowl, I am adding 1 soup can of cream of mushroom soup, a soup can full of milk, ½ cup of sour cream, a teaspoon of garlic, and a ½ teaspoon of salt. And I mix this all together, and then I'm going to go ahead and add in my meat mixture to this and mix it all in. I am definitely looking for some recipes to use up my cream of mushroom soup because I had a bunch of cans of cream of mushroom soup and I still have them about 4 years later, so I'm just trying to go through them and use them up. So I was happy to use that in a recipe today. This is a slow cooker meal, so it's another great meal for those rush days where you're really busy and you just need to get something in that slow cooker and have it ready a few hours later. So I get my slow cooker ready by adding a little bit of oil to the bottom and just rubbing it around the bottom and the sides because I want to make sure that my fresh potatoes are not going to be sticking to the bottom or the side of this slow cooker. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in about 2 cups of the shredded potatoes or hash browns. And then on top of that, I'm adding in my meat sauce with the sauce that I added there. And on top of that, I'm going to add in 1 drained can of corn. And on top of that, I'm going to go ahead and add in the rest of my potatoes. Now you can go ahead and stir this in to combine it now if you want, but you can just leave it layered like this and it will cook just fine. To the top of this, you can go ahead and add some salt and then 2 to 3 cups of shredded cheese, depending on how much cheese you would like to have in this. This is definitely a hearty meal full of meat and dairy, so it's very satiating, so it does go a far way. I would personally add a side salad to this just to add in a few extra vegetables, but it was a really fun and tasty meal, and it was decently budget friendly. A lot more so when you add in the turkey and the lentils instead of having ground beef. I'd like to take a moment right now to thank the sponsor of our video, which is Marcy Luttrell. Marcy became a member of my other creator group over on Patreon, where I offer a lot more content that I do not offer anywhere else. I offer frugal monthly lists to help your budget, weekly posts, monthly blogs, as well as video tutorials on budget meals that I do not offer anywhere else. If you're interested in joining, I will provide a link for that over in the description box for you. A wonderful budget-friendly meal is always cabbage rolls. However, I decided to do a different take on the cabbage rolls today and do a deconstructed slow cooker cabbage roll. I start off by chopping up 1 onion and getting it in the frying pan. And again, I'm going to use my ground turkey and lentil combo because it is just the most budget-friendly way to do meat. I am also using ground turkey because that is what I have in the freezer. Ground sausage is not bad comparative for price. It would also be a great alternative here instead of the turkey if you don't want ground turkey. So you could use ground sausage and that would work just fine, but I would also suggest splitting it with some lentils or some beans just to help that budget stretch a little bit further. So you can take 1/2 of a large cabbage or 1 small cabbage and dice it up into 1-inch pieces and throw it into your slow cooker with your meat mixture. For the sauce, I am taking 1 large can of diced tomatoes, 1/2 cup of filtered water, and to that I am going to add about 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. You're then going to mix that up just so that the flavors are all combined. I will have all the recipes for all of the meals that I am doing today listed in the description box for you in case you're worried about missing anything here. To the meat, I did also add about a teaspoon of thyme for the seasonings. And once I'm done mixing that tomato sauce, I'm going to go ahead and add that to my cabbage just over top. I'm going to give it a good stir, and then I'm going to leave it on low for about 6 hours. I want that cabbage to be really nicely cooked. I'm also going to go through about halfway and give it a good stir just to make sure that everything is nice and well combined. I love cabbage rolls, so doing a deconstructed cabbage roll in the slow cooker was so easy, and it was really flavorful and tasty, and also budget friendly. Lastly, I am going to do one of my absolutely favorite budget soups. This is a lentil and potato soup. To a saucepan, I am going to fry up 1 onion. Going to chop up about 6 small potatoes and get them in there. I'm then going to add about a 1/2 cup of lentils, a teaspoon of thyme, teaspoon of garlic, and 4 cups of broth. I have bouillon cubes, so I'm adding 4 cups of water and then the bouillon cubes. I also added a can of carrots, but you can add fresh carrots in at the beginning with your potatoes. Let that simmer for 1/2 hour and you have a beautiful soup. Okay, so here's everything that I have picked up for my family of 4 for breakfast, lunch, and dinner this week. I did my best to pick up the healthiest choices as possible while staying on a budget and getting carbs, proteins, as well as fruit and vegetables. On a budget this low, you definitely have to get pretty creative to make sure that you're meeting all your macro needs. Okay, so here you can see my receipt for everything came to $31.67, although after I had bought all this, I got to thinking if we don't have enough for leftovers for lunch the next day, I wanted to make sure that we had something else. So I went back out and got peanut butter and some bread for $5.78. So the total came to $37.48. So I'll make sure I put it here in case I got that wrong. But anyways, that's our total, and that's what we're going to be working with this week. So our breakfast every day this week is oatmeal. If you have sugar, you can put sugar in here. I like to use cinnamon. At the beginning of the week, we had 1/2 a banana with these, but this is at the end of the week that I am showing this to you, and I am out of bananas, so it is just oatmeal. It's 1/2 a cup of oatmeal dried per adult and 1/4 cup per child because they get full at that. It does bulk out quite a bit when you put water in it. If you have milk for the extra protein, absolutely put it in there. If not, then this is just the breakfast. So we are starting off with a hot dog pasta. So I'm just going to get some water on to boil. Make sure that you salt your water because that's when the pasta takes in that flavoring as while it's boiling. And then I'm just going to dice these hot dogs up into 1-inch size pieces. If you are feeding little kids, then I would suggest cutting these lengthwise in half as well so that you reduce any choking hazards. But my kids are bigger and they can handle just the diced hot dogs. My husband said that this meal brought him back to when he was a kid and would have hot dogs and macaroni. So I think if you're a parent now, that may have been a popular meal when you were a kid, because I know I had that as a child as well quite often. So I'm taking about 1/2 of my bag of pasta here and getting it into the boiled salted water. I know I am doing a decent amount of pasta. Like I said, we are doing leftovers for lunch for the most part. I am also hoping that day 7 will be a leftover night, so having some extra pasta is fine. Now, as my pasta is boiling, I am also just going to throw my hot dogs in there so they can cook along with the pasta. So I let the pasta cook about 8 minutes. I don't know about you guys, but my kids love testing the pasta by taking a strand and throwing it against a cupboard. And if it sticks, then the pasta's done. Then I just drain the pasta out, and I'm going to add the rest of my can of tomato sauce. Off camera, I did reserve some of the tomato sauce because I'm going to use that for some mini pizzas the next day. But anyways, I add in the tomato sauce, and then I'm going to rinse out the container of the tomato sauce with a bit of water and add that in as well, because we are not wasting any of that tomato sauce. So on top of this pasta, I'm just going to add a little bit of the cheese we had, just add a little bit of extra protein and extra filler. This meal was delicious and a huge hit with the kids. They absolutely love this one. So the next day we are doing some mini pizzas with these English muffins. I'm just starting off by cutting each English muffin in half and getting it on a baking sheet. Next, I'm going to take the tomato sauce that I reserved from the previous night, and I'm just going to spoon a bit of tomato sauce onto each of the halves of the English muffins. So I'm not showing all of the English muffins here. I did do 2 baking sheets full of them, so that way it does feed my family of 4 with them. So I got these little snackables for the salami and the cheese. Buying salami all on its own would have been about $14, or buying a bag of pepperoni would have been $11, and it just was too far out of the budget. These little snackables were on sale for $2 each, and they had the protein, the salami, that I needed for these pizzas. So instead of buying an $11 bag, I got the salami for $4. So I just figured this was a good meal, and the little crackers that they came with, the kids just munched on as a snack. So this also came with cheese, but because I wanted cheese for other meals, I did buy a bag of shredded cheese, but adding these extra cheese slices to these English muffins it just added a different flavor of cheese, and it was delicious. So on top of that cheese, I just added a little handful of the shredded cheese just to make them nice and cheesy. And then I'm going to get them in my oven at 450 degrees until they're nice and melted for about 10 minutes. But if you like them a little bit crispier, I'd leave them in there for a little extra longer. So in between 10 and 15 minutes. Now, this was a meal that we did not have leftovers for the following lunch. So we did have some toast and peanut butter, and the kids actually had some extra hot dogs with some bread. Moving on to the next day, I made sure that I soaked my lentils overnight, and just to make them nice and soft, and I personally just think they're safer to soak them first. Then I am going to drain them to get rid of all of that soaking water. Then I'm just going to rinse them as well. This just makes the lentils easier to cook. It doesn't take as long, where if you cook them from dry, then you're going to have to boil them or cook them for a little bit longer. And to make them easier to digest, then I would suggest soaking them in a little bit of apple cider vinegar. So for this dinner, I'm going to put together some lentil burritos. So as the vegetable, I have these zucchini. These zucchini were nice and cheap, so they were the preferred vegetable for this week. So I'm just going to dice them up, and then I'm going to quarter them so they're nice and bite size and get them in the frying pan. If you have a little bit of oil, you can add it to your frying pan while you are frying these up. If not, then you can add a bit of water and it will do the same thing. Next, I'm just going to add in 2 cups of lentils. You could use a bit more here, but I'm definitely trying to withhold some of my lentils for following dinners. So to this mixture, I am going to add some seasonings. If you don't have any seasonings and you just have salt, that is fine. But I am adding some salt, some chili powder, about a teaspoon of cumin, and a teaspoon of garlic powder. Then I am going to add 1/4 cup of water to help the lentils cook a little bit more. So we're just going to stir this to get all the flavors combined, and then we are going to cover it and cook it until everything is soft. This should take about 10 to 12 minutes on high. Once that is fully cooked, you're going to take one of your tortilla shells and you're going to put maybe a quarter cup of the filling in there. You don't want to overfill it, otherwise you end up not being able to wrap it very well. I am going to add some of my cheese in here because you just can't have a burrito without some cheese. Then I'm going to fold it up, and I am also going to stick it on a hot frying pan just to crisp up the tortilla. You don't have to do this, but it's something that my family does prefer. These turned out really nice and flavorful. Those lentils are so filling, so we each had 2. There was enough for 3 each, but we did keep some for leftovers for the next day. So for the next day's dinner, I am doing a slow cooker lentil soup. So I'm adding in about half of the lentils that I have left. I think this is about 3 cups. And then I'm going to cover them with water. Now, if you have any broth or bouillon cubes, this would be perfect to add extra flavor to this. However, I'm just going to use water because not everybody has broth or bouillon cubes available to them. To this, I'm also adding about a cup of our frozen vegetables, and I am adding in some salt and some thyme to add some extra flavors. Then I'm just going to cover that up and let it cook for 4 to 6 hours on low. This soup was really nourishing, it was tasty, and again, those lentils are so filling, and it's a good, healthy dinner. So for the next dinner, I'm going to use up the rest of my lentils, and I'm getting them in a frying pan. I'm going to put them in with some more water just so they can cook some more. So as they cook, they will expand and absorb this water. To this, I'm also adding some salt as well as some chili powder just for some extra flavoring. So I'm going to stir this in so that the flavors can all combine. I'm going to get my lid on it, and I'm going to cook this for about 10 minutes until the lentils are nice and soft and cooked. To this lentil dish, I am going to add in my last zucchini. So once again, I'm going to dice this up into bite-sized pieces, and I'm going to get that cooking in with my lentils. Lentils do not take very long at all to cook, so as they are cooking with these lentils, they will also absorb all of the flavor of the salt and the chili powder. I use chili powder because it does add a bit of a chili or taco taste to the dish. If you do not like chili powder, you are welcome to use whatever seasoning that your family enjoys. So this is the dinner. I did add some bread as we had some bread left just to add an extra filler. And it was a bit more like a sloppy Joe dinner, but it was really delicious. So our next dinner is going to be another pasta dish. I am adding in the rest of my pasta because once again, I am looking for a 1 night of leftovers. So I'm just going to get it all cooked up here. So while the pasta is cooking, I add in the remainder of my frozen vegetables so they can all cook together. And I let everything boil for 8 minutes until it was all fully cooked. After that, I just put it all in a strainer and then I get it back in my pot. Now I'm going to use my cream of chicken soup just to add a bit of a sauce to this pasta. And after that, I do add in the remainder of my shredded cheese to this pasta just to add in some extra protein. And this turned into a beautiful, creamy, cheesy pasta, and it was a hit. Pasta dishes can be so inexpensive, but also so flavorsome that they make the best budget meals. So this one was a good one. I really enjoyed it. The pasta also typically makes a lot of really good leftovers. We are all looking for ways to save some money, and there is no better way to do that than in the kitchen. So I am going to bring you 5 delicious, very budget-friendly meals that are great for the family. Right now, the garden is giving us tons of peppers. We have lots to use up, so I decided to make some fajitas. Now, if you are not growing your own peppers, right now peppers are in season, so head out to your local farmer's market. I know at mine, if I buy peppers in bulk, then I can get them for 33 cents a pepper or less. So make sure that you're checking out your local farmer's market and buying them in bulk. It will save you a lot of money. This is a really quick, really delicious, and very family-friendly meal. My kids love this one. So it is a sheet pan meal. I'm just getting out my baking sheet. I am tossing 1/2 of an onion on one sheet along with about 2 chopped peppers. And then I am chunking up a couple of chicken breasts and tossing them on there as well. As for seasonings, I put on a tablespoon of olive oil along with a tablespoon of cumin and a tablespoon of chili powder. And then I'm just going to go right in there and massage that seasoning all in so it is covering all of my onions and peppers and chicken. I bake this at 450 for 25 minutes until that chicken is nice and cooked. And then you can go ahead and put this on your wraps with whatever toppings you like. It really turns out so delicious. I find the best way to save money in the kitchen is to make sure that I am using up ingredients that I have sitting around that may need to be used up. And right now I have some canned baby clams that really need to be used up. So I'm going to go ahead and make a clam linguini. I am chopping up 1 yellow onion and I'm going to go ahead and get that into my frying pan with a little bit of olive oil, and I am going to fry that until the onions are translucent. Now I am chopping up 6 cloves of garlic, and I honestly think that 6 cloves in a recipe should be the minimum, because just 2 or 3 is crazy. I think 6 is a great number. So I am chopping up 6 cloves of garlic and I am going to toss that in there with my onions. Now, a regular recipe for linguini calls for white wine. I do not have wine in the house and it can be expensive to buy, so I am using some home canned broth. I am putting in 1 cup of this broth, and this is after the onions and the garlic have been cooking for a little bit. After that, I'm tossing in 2 cans of these baby clams. Now, if you do not have baby clams at your own home, you do not need to be using clams. You can make a meat-free linguini and just leave any meat product out, or you can sub it in for another cheaper meat like chicken or maybe tuna and use that instead. Once that's in there, I add a tablespoon of lemon juice, as well as 1/3 cup of chopped parsley. Now, I am personally growing parsley in my backyard, so I don't have to buy any of that, but it is a fairly cheap herb to buy, and it makes this pasta nice and green, which is nice. Now, again, I don't have linguine noodles, so I am just using spaghetti noodles. It is totally okay to sub out in a recipe and use what you have, instead of having to follow that recipe to a T. If you don't have an ingredient, don't feel like you have to run out and get it. You can use what is in your house. So after I've cooked this pasta, I put it in with the sauce and just meld it together, and this was an amazing meal. My kids really enjoyed it, which I did not expect. So we were super happy with that meal, and it is quite cheap. Now, again, like I said, we are getting tons of peppers right now, and a lot of them are really nice and big. So I decided this night that I was going to do up some stuffed peppers. So if you have gone to the farmer's market and you have gotten yourself a big bulk order of peppers, this is another great way to use them. And if you are growing your own peppers and are having an abundance of them, this is also a wonderful way to use them up. I am chopping 1 onion and I get it in my frying pan with a little olive oil and just cook them until the onions are translucent. I then add a can of black beans, a can of corn, and 1/2 a large can of diced tomatoes. And I am just going to stir these in so that they can meld together. After that, I am adding about a tablespoon of cumin, a teaspoon of garlic powder, and a couple teaspoons of chili powder. And I'm just going to stir this in. This gives it a bit of a taco or a Mexican feel to it, and we quite like that in our house. So this is the way I'm doing our stuffed peppers tonight. So I'm just going to cut my peppers in half, and then I'm going to de-seed them and get them on a baking sheet. At this time when I'm doing this, I love to keep the seeds and save the seeds so that I can dry them out and have all these free seeds for next year. That's another great way to be saving money if you happen to be growing them yourself. And if you don't have a lawn, don't be scared. I grow all of my peppers in pots, so I don't even have peppers in the ground anywhere. They do much better in pots for me, so they're a very pot-friendly plant if you're ever wanting to grow them. Now, to my dish, I am adding 2 cups of fully cooked rice. So I cook the rice beforehand just to make sure that it ends up fully cooked, because in an instance like this, it may not cook all the way through. So I cook it separately and then add it. I am now going to add this to our peppers. I'm just going to fill these halves right up to the top. And then I'm going to add a decent helping of shredded cheese to each one of these peppers. During this time, I have also preheated my oven to 450 degrees. So after I've got the cheese on top, I'm going to go ahead and pop these into the oven for 25 to 30 minutes until those peppers are nice and cooked and my cheese is melted and a little bit crispy. I find the cheese on top is a good sell for kids. Anything with melted cheese on, they are typically okay with. And my kids have grown up eating stuff like this as well, so it's not quite as hard to get them to eat it as maybe other kids who aren't quite as used to eating peppers or vegetables or things like that. But I do find that if I'm putting cheese on top, it does help the transition when they are trying to eat things like this. And because this does have a bit of a Mexican flair to it, if you wanted to add some nachos on the side, that would be also a good addition. I typically always have a salad on the side, so that is helpful as well. But these were so super delicious. You could pretty much just pick them up by hand, and the peppers almost acted like a taco shell. Another thing that is coming in from the garden for me right now are these Canadian crookneck squash. So I decided to do a soup today. Soups are so nutritious, so full of fiber, and are also incredibly budget friendly. Almost every soup that you will ever make is pretty much a great budget friendly option because they are so filling, and then they are also just so nutritious. So a butternut squash soup is something I love to make in the fall, and it's been so chilly out that it feels definitely like soup season. I start off in my pot by taking a tablespoon of olive oil and 1 medium onion. I chop the onion up and get it into my pot, and I let that cook for a good 5 minutes before I take a small squash, chop it up, take the skin off, and toss that into my pot as well. I then add 3 cloves of garlic, although I believe I added a couple extra cloves there, so 5 cloves, let's call it, of garlic. And then I add a teaspoon of cumin, teaspoon of salt, and I also add a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. I go ahead and add 6 cups of broth. If you're wanting to keep this a vegan meal, then you're going to add vegetarian broth. If not, you can add a broth of your choice. Now, I had beef broth as well as vegetarian broth, so that's what I added. I then add a cup of lentils, a half a cup of rice, and I let that simmer for 45 minutes, and it gives me this really hearty butternut squash stew, pretty much. It is so super delicious, and I think you would absolutely love to try it. My last recipe is one that is always fun for the kids, and that is chickpea fritters. I have a ton of chickpeas in my house, and I like to use them up. So I'm going to go ahead and use 1 jar of my chickpeas. 1 jar is worth 2 cans of chickpeas, pretty much. I'm going to go ahead and add about a teaspoon of salt, as well as 3/4 cup of flour. And the flour is just going to help these bind together. Then I'm going to add a teaspoon of cumin, teaspoon of garlic powder, About a tablespoon of chopped parsley. If you're finding this a bit dry, you can add a tablespoon or two of water to it. But I'm just going to go ahead and take my potato masher and mash this until it is all combined. After that, I can form it into patties and get it into my oiled frying pan. These patties take about 5 to 7 minutes to cook per side, and they are such a delicious meal and super kid friendly. If you're looking for more budget dinner ideas or meal ideas, make sure you check out the playlist that I have linked at the end. It is so full of very budget-friendly ideas to really help you save a lot of money in the kitchen. If you're looking for more budget content not found on this page, you can find me over on Patreon, where I have tutorials on more budget-friendly meals not shown here, as well as monthly or weekly posts and frugal lists of things that you should have in your house to help save you money. I will have that linked in the comments if you're interested in going and checking it out. So let's get started, and I'm going to go ahead and chop up 1 medium onion. So an original recipe for this tikka masala would call for a shallot chopped up. Now, I don't personally ever have shallots on hand, and I do believe they are a little bit more expensive than an onion, but onions are your next best thing. So I have diced up 1 medium yellow onion. I'm going to get it into my frying pan with a little bit of olive oil in there. Now to this, I'm also adding 1 small zucchini diced up because I like to add a little bit more vegetables to my tikka masala. Now we're just going to cook this until the onions are translucent and the zucchini is nicely done. All right, so my onions and zucchini have been cooking for about 5 minutes, so they're nice and soft. To this, I'm going to add 1 quart of my home canned chickpeas. 1 quart is equal to 4 cups if you're measuring in a different way. All right, so to this now I am adding my jar of home canned tomato sauce. Again, this is worth 4 cups. Okay, so to this I am adding 2 teaspoons of garam masala powder, spice mix. 1 teaspoon of cumin, 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of turmeric, 1 teaspoon of paprika, and 2 teaspoons of salt. Now, if you add coriander, you could add coriander to this as well. It's not a spice that I have on hand though, so I will not be adding that today. Oh, and I've just forgot 1 teaspoon of ginger. And we'll just give that a quick stir to make sure all the spices are well combined. And I'm going to let this simmer for a good 15 to 20 minutes. All right, this has been simmering for a while. I'm going to add 1 can of full-fat coconut milk to this. And then I'm going to add a tablespoon of lemon juice. You can do fresh squeezed, but I have this here. So I'm just going to add that. You can serve this with rice and a salad or just rice, and it is a perfect, filling, budget-friendly dinner. All right, so tonight we are going to do a version of the red beans and rice meal. So I'm starting off with my pot here, and I'm going to get some olive oil in there because we're going to saute some vegetables. So I'm just using about 2 tablespoons of olive oil in here. To that, I'm adding 1 diced yellow onion. Say this is about 5 stalks of celery diced. And 2 of my homegrown peppers here, and those are nicely diced. So I'm just going to let these saute in that olive oil for about 5 to 10 minutes. All right, so those vegetables have been sauteing for about 5 minutes now, and I've got these 2 ham bones that I'm going to put in here, and I'm going to add 6 cups of water. Now at this point, if you have soaked some dried red beans, you would put those beans in here as well. I'm trying to work with some canned beans that I'm trying to get out of my pantry, so I'm going to add those a little later because I don't want this to be bean mush. So if you have dried beans, you're going to add them now, and you're going to simmer this low and slow for like good 4 or 5 hours, just so all of those flavors meld together. But for me, I'm adding these ham bones, 6 cups of water, and then I'm going to let that simmer, and it's going to create a beautiful broth. At this point, you're also going to add in your spices. Now, if you had bay leaves, I would add them in here. Right now, I am out of bay leaves, so I'm not adding those. I am, however, adding 2 tablespoons of a Cajun seasoning. There we go. So I'm going to let this simmer for a good 4 hours, and then I'm going to add in the rest of my ingredients. All right, so this has been simmering for about 3.5 hours. Now I'm going to add in some of my sausage here. I have 3 sausages. I'm going to fry them up first, get them nice and brown before I add them to our pot here. Browning them just helps with the texture once it's in the pot. Now, if you're wanting to keep this really budget friendly, you do not need to add the sausage because meat, as we know, is rather expensive these days. So that can always be left out. We do have the meat flavor with the bone from the ham. At this point, I'm also going to add my beans. I have 2 cans of beans. One was kidney beans, one was a mixed bean. I normally do red beans in here, but I'm just going to work with what I have right now. So I want them to simmer in that ham broth and then add the sausage so that they can absorb all that flavor as well. All right, so at this point, I am going to get my ham bones out, and then I'm going to get my sausage in here so that the sausage can fully combine with the rest of the meal. Now, traditionally, I think this is served with rice or maybe even grits, but I think for us for tonight, because we had rice last night, I'm going to do this with some mashed potatoes. Okay, so I'm just going to get my sausage into the pot here. And I'll just simmer this for another half an hour. All right, so I know this does not look like the traditional red beans and rice, obviously because I'm doing potatoes, but this is my version of it for today because like I said, I didn't want to do rice again. And this looks delicious, nice and budget friendly. Enjoy those beans. All right, so tonight is going to be a busy night for us, so I'm just working on a very quick slow cooker soup. And tonight we're going to do some Cajun potato soup. I'm starting off with 4 cups of broth, and I'm going to get that in my slow cooker. To that I'm adding 1 diced yellow onion. And to that I'm adding 6 diced potatoes. For seasoning, I am adding 2 teaspoons of my homemade Cajun sauce. So I'm just going to add the rest of that there. 1 teaspoon of paprika. 2 teaspoons of garlic powder. And a teaspoon of salt. I'm just going to give this a quick stir so all of those spices are combined in the broth. I'm cooking this on low for 6 to 7 hours, or you can cook it on high for 3 to 4 hours. All right, so my husband actually finished the soup up for me because I was at practice with my son. So what you're going to do is just blend the soup up after it's done cooking. Add a cup of either heavy cream, weeded milk, and then you can add some shredded cheese on top. So that's it. It's absolutely delicious. A nice twist on the regular pumpkin or potato soup. All right, so today we are going to be making a lentil curry. Lentils are super budget friendly, so this is a great meal to do it with. And like I've said before, if you really want to save some money, you're going to want to do beans and rice and make them taste good. And Indian cooking is wonderful at making beans and rice taste really good. So we're going to go ahead and work on this lentil curry, and my daughter's going to help me today. I'm going to start off by putting 2 tablespoons of olive oil in my pot here. And then we have chopped up 6 cloves of garlic that are going to go straight into this olive oil and saute for about 2 to 5 minutes. Now, I'm also adding zucchini just because I like to add the vegetables that we have in the fridge to our meals. So it doesn't necessarily call for zucchini in this curry, but I am going to add that today. So we're just going to start off by sauteing those. And we're going to get our seasonings in here. So 2 tablespoons of ginger, so 2 nice big squirts. Okay, that's good enough, yeah. Okay, we are going to do a tablespoon of cumin. That's good, that's good. We're going to do a tablespoon of coriander powder. That's fine. And now a tablespoon of turmeric powder. No, that's good. Go ahead with that. Thank you. We're also going to add a couple teaspoons of salt, and we're going to give that a stir around, please. To this, we are adding 4 cups of tomato sauce. That's fine. And now we're adding 1 cup of water. All right, to this, I'm going to add a cup of lentils. My daughter will add a cup of lentils. We're going to bring it to a boil and then simmer for 40 minutes. All right, so this is our curry. And now that it's cooked down and the lentils are fully cooked, I'm just going to go ahead and add a can of full fat coconut milk and get that all mixed in there. And then we are going to serve this with rice, and it is absolutely delicious. This meal was incredibly flavorful as well as a hit with the kids. It's one we will do often. All right, we are on to our last meal, and this is going to be butternut and sausage soup. So I'm starting off with my pot. I'm going to go ahead and get 2 tablespoons of olive oil in there because we are going to saute 1 diced onion. So I've got 1 diced yellow onion that I'm getting in here. And with that, I am also going to add my sausage. So I have 4 Italian sausages here. Again, if you want to make this more budget friendly, leave the sausage out, or you could even cut it in half. For me, though, sausage is a very budget friendly protein. I can get 4 of these sausages at the store for $5. So it is very budget friendly, especially when you're feeding a family. It makes more economical sense than chicken or beef. So I'm going to get this in here to saute for a little bit. About 5 to 8 minutes. All right, so the onions and the sausages have been cooking for about 8 minutes now, and I'm going to go ahead and add in about 2 cups of cubed butternut squash. And now I'm going to add in 6 cups of chicken broth. You can add, I personally have some bouillon cubes, so I'm going to add in my 6 cups of water and then 3 bouillon cubes. Home canned broth is definitely the most budget friendly option here. However, I have some bouillon cubes that need to be used up, so that's why I'm choosing to use them today. But if you are able to make your own broth, that is definitely the most budget friendly option. All right, we're gonna add our seasonings now. I'm gonna go ahead and add in 2 teaspoons of salt, a teaspoon of oregano, 2 teaspoons of garlic, and a teaspoon of sage. I have some homegrown sage here that I'm just going to mush up into there. All right, we are going to cover this and let it simmer for about a half an hour. All right, this has been simmering for about a half an hour, so I'm going to go ahead and add a cup of pasta. You can use whatever pasta you like. Whatever you have on hand is just great. With that, I am also adding about 2 cups of chopped greens, kale, spinach, turnip greens, beet greens. Those are also all great greens to add to this. We're just going to let this simmer for another 10 minutes and then our soup is done. All right, this soup is so good, so filling, and so nutritious. This is an absolute win, and it's really budget friendly. You honestly can never go wrong with soup. It's always really budget friendly. Add some pasta in there for good filler. Definitely recommend. Like, this one is just so great, especially if you guys are on a budget. All right, so today we are going to start off making chili beef and potato soup. So this recipe looks like it could be good, and I think my kids will probably enjoy this one. And I've just got to say, looking through all of these recipes, the recipes are so concise. There's not a lot to them. You can fit 2 on one page, or even more so. Like, they're just really concise, which if you ever go on Pinterest and look at recipes, or even today's recipe books, they're just so long. And it's like all these little informations that for some reason we don't just take for granted or understand, you know, like, it's, I don't know. It's just, they're so concise. I really, really like that. It's right down to the point. Okay, so we're going to start off by browning a half a pound of ground beef in our stock pot here. We're going to start off browning it, and then we're going to get in our onions, and it does call for some celery. I am allergic to celery, so I'm leaving that out. But if you want to add celery to this, you can go ahead and do that. All right, my beef has been browning for a couple of minutes now, and at this point I'm going to add in my onions, which is 1 whole onion and a half a cup of celery it calls for. So like I said, I have an allergy to celery, so I'm going to leave that out here. So we're just going to cook these down until the onions are nice and soft and translucent. Okay, at this point it asks for a 16-ounce can of diced tomatoes. I only have a 28-ounce can, so I'm just going to half it. There we go. And now it's asking for 2 cups of bone broth. I don't have any bone broth, and I like to personally make my own, but I do have some bouillon cubes that I'm using up. So I'm adding 2 cups of water with a bouillon cube in here. So that will be my broth. It does ask for 1 soup can full of water, so I'm just going to add a little extra water with that. Okay, so there's my extra water. And now it's asking for 2 cups of diced potatoes. And the recipe also asks for a cup of peas or green beans. And I like how it throws in there that it would like either cooked or leftover green beans or peas. I have lots of green beans right now, so that's what we're doing. Okay, to this, I'm going to add a half a teaspoon of salt and 1 teaspoon of chili powder. I'm also adding in 1/2 teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce. Worcestershire sauce. Worcestershire? There we go. Okay, so this is what it's looking like right now. I'm just going to stir all of this together, and then we're going to let it cook. It says to let it cook for about 15 minutes. I'm not sure if that's how long it's going to take for these potatoes to cook. We'll find out. But yeah, we're just going to stir this all together and then let it cook. Okay, so here's the meal, and I've just made some biscuits to go with it. It smells really good, looks really good, so the kids are going to give it a taste here.
9 out of 10.
9 out of 10, you like it?
Yeah, I'll have it again.
Awesome.
In my lunch tomorrow.
Okay.
What?
Okay.
Mm. 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10, you like it? Good. Okay, so we've tried the meal and we all thought it was pretty delicious and nice and filling. So budget meal for the win. All right, we are on our second meal and I am going to do this fruited chicken. And I figured this would be good because I am still looking to get rid of some of my pineapple zucchini, and this calls for canned pineapple. So I get to use some of this here. So fruited chicken. So I'm going to start off with 3/4 cup of flour and a teaspoon each of salt, garlic. It calls for celery salt. I do not have that. And ground nutmeg. So we're going to start putting it in a bag, because then I'm going to shake the chicken in that bag. Okay, so I've got my 3/4 cup of flour in here. Now I'm adding my 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/4 teaspoon of garlic. It calls for garlic salt. I don't have garlic salt, so what I'm going to do is add in an extra 1/4 teaspoon of salt to this. So I just added a 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder. So I'm going to add 1/2 teaspoon of salt instead of just 1/4. There we go. So we're just going to mix that up so it's all nicely combined. And then we're going to get our chicken in here and coat it. So this cookbook also says in order to save money on meat purchases that you should, especially chicken, buy the whole chicken and then cut it yourself, which I think is a beautiful tip because that does save money in the long run. I did find these on sale though when I purchased them, so this is what we're using because it's what I have. So I am going to be using this, but like I said, this book says to buy a whole chicken and cut it into pieces yourself, and that's what they're using here. So I love that tip, great tip, but if you find chicken on sale, I think whatever chicken you have works. So we're gonna go ahead and get these into the bag of flour and get them all coated. So once these are coated, it says to get them in a frying pan with some butter and brown the chicken. All right, so it said to use a 1/2 cup of butter. And I shut this off because my test freezer was being delivered. So we're just browning this chicken on both sides, and then it's going to go into the oven with a sauce on it. Okay, so for our sauce, it had me reserve 1 cup of the pineapple juice from my zucchini pineapple there. We are going to take 3 tablespoons of flour and add this in. And then 1/3 cup of soy sauce and 1 tablespoon of sugar. And we're just going to stir this up, and this is going to go over the chicken. Okay, so our browned chicken is going to be placed in a dish here. Okay, it said to arrange the fruit over the chicken, so I'm just going to spoon it on there. This reminds me very much of a Hawaiian chicken sheet pan meal that I made not that long ago, which also involved pretty much the same, but I never browned the chicken or floured the chicken first, so I'm very interested to see what it does there. All right, next I'm just going to pour this over the chicken. Okay, and it also said to put the drippings from the frying pan in here, so I'm going to do that. Okay, so that's all the butter and everything from the pan. Go straight in there. That kind of turned out a little black, so I don't know. We'll see how that turns out. I mean, it's just butter with flour, so I'm sure it's fine. We'll see. All right, now that that is over there, I'm putting this in at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for an hour. Okay, so this is what the chicken looks like coming out of the oven. And we're going to go ahead and give it a taste.
Okay, so I'm going to be trying whatever this is.
Fruity chicken.
Honestly, not bad. It just tastes like butter chicken. I really like it.
Any fruity taste to it?
A bit of sweet. Yeah. But I think it would be 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10, okay.
Trying this thing. It tastes like normal chicken.
Okay.
6 out of 10.
6 out of 10. Okay. Okay, so trying the fruity chicken here. Okay, I agree with the kids. It just tastes like my regular kind of, not shake and bake, but my floured chicken that I typically do. I don't honestly taste a lot of the pineapple juice in there, but it's really good. I give it a 10 out of 10. I liked it.
I'm going to try Amanda's fruit chicken here. Looks delicious anyways on the appearance. Yeah, it's good. It's very tasty. I would say it's very moist. Fruity, a little bit sweet. Definitely got a smoky flavor to it too, though. I would give it at least an 8, if not a 9.5 out of 10. Yeah.
All right, it is day 3, which means I am working on our 3rd recipe. And I am going to do a ham and mac bake today. So I'm going to start off with a 6 ounce or 1 2/3 cup. It calls for elbow macaroni. I don't have elbow macaroni. I do have these baby shells though. So this is what I'm going to use. And I'm going to go ahead and get this in a pot and get it cooked up. And then we're going to go ahead and work on our sauce that goes with this. Okay, so it's asking me to melt 1/4 cup and it says margarine or butter. This is a 1970s cookbook, so there's a lot of, I find, margarine and processed things in here. I don't have margarine and I'm not planning on using it, so I'm using butter here. So 1/4 cup of butter. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a quarter, once this is melted, a 1/4 cup of flour, 2 tablespoons of mustard, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Okay, so I am going to add my 1/4 cup of flour now that my butter is all melted, as well as my 2 tablespoons of mustard, down to the last little nitty gritty of my mustard here, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Now I'm just going to stir this all in to combine. It's just going to go ahead and make a roux here. Okay, and now to this I'm adding 2 cups of milk. Okay, and now it's asking for 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. And then we stir to combine and stir until it is nice and thick and bubbly. Okay, this is getting nice and thick, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat off because I think this is done here. Okay, The recipe calls for 2 cups of diced up ham. So I've got half a small ham here, and I'm just got the bone in, so I want to avoid that. Bone's up there. So we're just going to dice this up so that we can get it in with our mac and ham bake here. I'm just dicing it up into cubes. Oh, I was hoping to do that all in one. There we go. So we're just gonna get it in small cubes like this. And I imagine this will add a decent amount of flavor to this pasta dish. And ham like this is not that expensive, especially when you're not using a lot of it. So I have the ham there, but I think it was $11, and but I'm not cooking all of it, right? So I could use this for one dish and then for another dish, which makes these dishes so much less expensive when you piece the meat out like that. There we go. Okay, I might just freeze this because I've got the bone right here. I'm going to freeze this because I will use this in a dish like split pea soup or ham and beans. So I'm just going to save that right there in a freezer bag, and we're going to use the rest of this with our dish. Okay, so to put this together, I am adding my cooked macaroni. And to this, I'm going to stir in my sauce that I've got going here. That all out of my pot. So we're just going to stir that in. Now to this, I'm going to add my ham. And it also called for 2 apples to be peeled and diced. These are just off my tree. I just did these. You can tell how fresh they are by how quickly they oxidized and got brown. Anyways, this is very interesting. I'm not sure my husband's going to like this. He does not like fruit added to a dinner, savory dinner. He absolutely abhors that idea. So we're going to find out. Maybe I won't tell him and we'll see what he thinks. We're just going to put that in there. And we're supposed to be adding breadcrumbs to this. I actually don't have breadcrumbs, so what I'm going to do is just crunch up some crackers and put over top of this. And then I'm going to get it into an oven at 350 degrees for 30 to 35 minutes. Okay, so the recipe called for 2 tablespoons of melted butter. And then 1 cup of breadcrumbs. So this is what we're using here. So I've got 1 cup of just mashed up crackers because I don't have breadcrumbs. I also don't have any bread in my freezer that I could use to make breadcrumbs. So this is what we're working with. And we're just going to mix it all together. And then we're going to top this with this. Okay, this actually smells really good. I think a lot of older casserole recipes are very similar. I have a lot of breadcrumb toppings. When I first read this, I thought it was going to have cheese on it. So we'll see. It looks really good. Not a vegetable in sight, but we could always add like a salad on the side or something. So I'm going to go ahead and get this in the oven, 350 degrees for half an hour.
Everybody enjoyed this recipe decently, but it's probably not one that we'll do again.
All right, I am doing the last recipe for today, for this week, out of this cookbook here. And we are going to be doing some Boston baked beans. Now, I am going to change this recipe just a little bit because it does call for me to use dry beans and then cook them. And then I'm baking it for like 5 to 7 hours. And that's just not in the cards for me today. So I am going to be using some canned beans because I actually need to use these canned beans up. I've had them for a while. And I'm going to be putting it in the slow cooker. So I'm still going to cook it for the 5 to 7 hours, just not in my oven. I'll be doing it in the slow cooker. I know it would be more budget friendly to use the dry beans, and that's why this is in here. Definitely far more budget friendly. But for me, for today, I am going to use the canned beans. Now, the other change that I'm going to make is I do not have molasses, so I'm going to be using maple syrup instead. My molasses is probably cheaper, but I have the maple syrup. I don't have the molasses, so I'm going to use the maple syrup. And that is really the only change that I'm going to be doing here. Now, I was planning on doing 5 of these meals, but they've made a lot of meal. Like they've made a decent portion for these meals, and we have a lot of leftovers. So I kind of want to use the leftovers for the last night. I don't want to make another meal because I want to eat those leftovers up. I don't want them going bad on us. So I am just going to stick to 4 of these recipes. Okay, so the original recipe called for 2 cups of dried navy beans to be cooked for an hour, actually to be boiled for 10 minutes, and then you let it sit for an hour, which is why I think that the cooking time was so long. However, I'm going to use 4 cans. I've got Romano beans and some white kidney beans that I'm going to use because I don't have navy beans. When dry beans are cooked, they expand quite a bit. So that's why I'm using 4 cans here, because I believe those 2 cups would turn into 4 cups of beans, or possibly even more. And then it also calls for you to save 2 cups of the liquid. So I'm not going to drain these. I'm just going to put them in there with the liquid. Actually, I think I might add a little liquid as well. Okay, so I'm supposed to be adding 2 teaspoons of dry mustard. I thought I had dry mustard, but I do not. So I'm just going to go ahead and add regular mustard in here. 2 teaspoons. To this, I'm also adding a 1/2 cup of maple syrup. That was supposed to be molasses. I do not have molasses, so it's maple syrup. And 1/3 cup of brown sugar. Okay, to this, I am adding 1 medium diced onion. Oh, my eyes are watering. This one was nice and fresh. Anyways, 1 medium onion diced in there. Okay, and lastly, it does call for a 1/4 pound of salt pork to be diced and put in here. I'm not entirely sure what salt pork is, so this is just a ham that I had bought that I had for the other recipe that I was using. So I had used 1/2 of the pork at that point, so I'm going to use 1/2 of the pork at this point as well. It's also salted, it's cured, so I imagine that's what it means. It's a bit more than a 1/4 pound, but I don't want to have any more of it in my fridge, so we're just going to use the rest of it up here. So I'm going to toss this in here. We're going to give it a quick stir, and then I'm going to let this sit on low for 5 to 7 hours.
Shut up.
All right, so we're just going to stir it to combine everything here, and then we'll get the lid on. But that's looking pretty good.
No, you didn't.
Thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope you enjoyed these budget meals and that they will help you save some money in the kitchen. Make sure you're checking out my entire budget meal playlist, as I have a lot more ideas there as well. If you enjoy saving money, frugal living, and urban homesteading, make sure you like and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.